Good morning. You're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Danie Laurel. It's the start of a new trading day. Let's kick off with our top story. The 401 billion peso Bayanihan 3 stimulus package is now on its way to the Senate. That is after the lower house approved the bill on the third and final reading on a vote of 238-0 with one abstention courtesy of Albay Representative Edsel Lagman. Over 90% of lawmakers authored the measure, including Speaker Lord Alan Velasco himself. The centerpiece of this bill is the 216 billion peso funding for the dual tranche distribution of 2,000 peso cash aid to all 108 million Filipinos, regardless of social status. It also allows wage subsidies and emergency assistance to quarantine-affected households and workers, as well as local government support and free COVID testing for seamen and other migrant Filipino workers. The bill, however, may face some challenges. Malacanang has earlier said that the passage of Bayanihan 3 is not urgent, saying the government should allow the 2021 national budget and previous economic packages to run their course before passing a new stimulus measure. Senate President Tito Soto has earlier said senators do not have enough time to tackle bills as Congress adjourns session on June 4th. Meanwhile, the lower house also approved on final reading a resolution that seeks to ease foreign ownership limits in the 1987 charter. Congressmen will introduce amendments by inserting the phrase, quote, unless otherwise provided by law, unquote, in provisions limiting foreign ownership in some sectors. Now, manufacturing activity in the Philippines declined at a softer pace in the month of May. That's as new orders improved with the easing of lockdown restrictions in NCR and the nearby provinces. IHS Markit reports that PMI stood at 49.9 in May. That's a slight improvement from April's 49 reading, but that's still below the 50 level, which means it is still in contraction. The last time the country breached the 50 neutral mark, which signals an expansion, was in March, when PMI clocked in at 52.2. That's a month COVID infection surged in the capital, prompting the return to strict lockdowns in NCR+, but these restrictions have been eased since May 15th after a drastic decline in cases. Now, IHS Markit economist Shriya Patel says May PMI data revealed a swift movement towards stabilization, with some businesses already resuming their operations. IHS Markit said the firms remain optimistic on their output expectations in the next 12 months. That's as they hope the ongoing vaccination program will help the country go back to normal by May 2022. Quick check on the local unit, our dear peso, amid that PMI print still in contraction mode. Of course, yesterday you can see that having risen for a fourth straight day. I'm going to pull out the 1 month chart for you so you can see how our performance has been right there. Nevertheless, it had hit its highest levels in September 2016. It is trading quite weaker this morning as well, 47.7882, the greenback, after it had already rebounded in the month of May. And this, according to Irene Chung, she's an FX strategist at ANZ in Singapore. The US dollar, the dollar peso, remains quite heavy on the back of a weaker dollar. That's what she says, and that's actually what had been driving the strength of the peso. But she did caution that since the governor now expects from the BSP a full recovery of the economy only in 2022, when that happens, the imports might start rebounding, the trade deficit might widen, which will be negative to the peso. Now, before we get to the markets, just a quick update on our vaccine story here. Now, good news for those of you who have gotten the Sinovac jab. The World Health Organization said on Tuesday it has now approved this Sinovac biotech vaccine for emergency use listing. Now, this will now allow Sinovac to be included in COVAX, which is, of course, the WHO's program for providing vaccines for poor countries, which has been facing major supply problems because of those Indian exports being curbed. Now, the WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus welcomed this move. He said this vaccine, the Sinovac, is safe and effective, and said that its easy storage requirements make it suitable for low-income countries. This is now the eighth vaccine to get a WHO listing. And meanwhile, Sinovac had already said it has supplied more than 600 million doses already at home and abroad as of the end of May. Now, let's open our index here, taking a quick check on that 6666.91. That is up by 0.6%. And this comes, of course, as we saw quite hefty buy-in from our foreign investors yesterday. Net purchases of 341 million, with a block sale, of course, of 7.7 billion pesos. Half of those trading volumes relating to the MONDE NISSIN IPO. But despite that listing yesterday, which was rather large, the index nevertheless managed to stay flat. And I just want to show you one specific sector we are watching out for here, and that is the banks. I'm going to take a quick peek on our banks, and that comes, of course, as the BSP says, the digital transactions are continuing to surge. That's as more consumers are starting to use the digital online usage for their purchases amid the ongoing pandemic here. The BSP data has shown that the PesoNet and InstaPay transactions last month surged by more than 4 times, 276% by volume. That's from a year earlier, and 127% by value. Another thing that they've shown is the QRPH person-to-person payments that rose 23% and 38% by volume and value, respectively. Now, recall that the central bank targets to have 50% of the countries done online, the payments done online. That will be by 2023. That's their target. Now, back to that IPO, of course, the largest ever we've seen here in the Philippines, and the largest for a food manufacturer in the rest of Southeast Asia. We are joined by Chris Mangun of AAA Equities to discuss MONDE NISSIN. Good morning, Chris, and welcome to the broadcast.
Good morning, Danny. Glad to be back.
Chris, of course, biggest IPO that we've seen, exciting times here. And nevertheless, it did close a tad bit lower than its IPO price. But, noting that it's now heftily right at the IPO price, 13 pesos and 50 centavos. It seems that 13.48 was quite a strong floor pricing here. Is that something that you expected, especially since this IPO is as large as it is?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this was expected by many that we weren't going to see much volatility. Uh, you're right, it did lose a little bit, but overall, it did allow investors that wanted to get out at these prices to sell their shares and raise cash, maybe trim those positions. Now, the thing about IPOs is there's really only two types of IPOs really. Companies that raise money because they need the extra cash right now for great expansion, and then on the other side of the spectrum, there are companies that are doing an IPO because they believe that this is the time that they're going to get maximum valuation. So I'm going to leave it to everybody else to decide where this company falls in that spectrum.
Okay, but Chris, just for our retail traders here, it's now their opportunity to tap into this stock, especially as the institutional investors had gobbled that up. It was oversubscribed, 540 million of over allotment even. What would be the price to be entering right now? Are we supposed to be waiting for it to break down further, or at the IPO or a slightly higher might be a good time to be investing?
Well, I mean, depending on your goals, really, or your investment appetite. If you're in for the long term, getting in at these prices, to me, I think is all right. But of course, if you can get it cheaper, the better, right? Now, if you look at the trading on the stock just yesterday, uh, the broker that they assigned to do their stabilization with UBS, and they were the top buyers of that stock. Now, they have not disclosed whether all of the buying from them was for the stabilization, but if it was, then they've already used about 5% of the proceeds for the stabilization. And usually, companies allocate at least 10% or a maximum of 10% for allocation. So, I mean, for stabilization. So, uh, I would suggest waiting at least a week because it's
Okay.
really too soon to tell how the what the trend's going to be for the stock. Because the first week it's always going to be very unpredictable because they're going to there's going to be a stabilization fund in there that's going to support it, and then on
Mhm.
the other hand, there's going to be some investors that are going to want to trim their position. Let's say reduce it by 20% just to raise the extra cash. So I would suggest waiting at least a week or two, and whatever the price is, whether it's more expensive or much cheaper in the next couple of weeks, that would be a better entry level.
Okay, so it's not the time to be trading here. It's quite a big issuance. Now, Chris, the pricing was already significantly discounted from their initial guidance. It was above 17 pesos initially. That's how much they wanted to raise. What does this matter when it comes to valuation? Does it mean that these valuations are more fair, or is there much more upside to be gained because of this discount? Are their plans overly ambitious or completely achievable?
Well, in terms of the valuation, I think at the original price that they set, which is 17.50, most people were concerned that it was way too expensive, especially right now. But even at current levels, there's still some concerns that it's trading higher than its industry peers. I mean, if you look at the ratios, they will say that it is more expensive now. I don't trade much based on the ratios, but for those fundamental investors that really look at that, that's a really big thing for them. So reducing the price did allow these investors to get comfortable. Although, in terms of whether it can go back to those valuations anytime soon, uh, uh, there's more doubt than optimism on it. Now, regarding those ambitious growth targets that you mentioned, um, honestly, I I really I'm really struggling to see uh, how they will enact these ambitious targets. Like you said,
Okay.
um, when it comes to the local staples like the biscuits and the noodles, they're growing at about 1 to 2, maybe 3% every year. So that really isn't going to be
Hmm.
a huge growth factor for them. The more exciting part of the business uh, was their investment in the alternative plant-based meats
Mm-hmm. Corn.
sector. But if you look at the revenues on it, it looks like they've plateaued since 2018. They're the number one brand in the UK, but they've struggled to really get a hold of the U.S. market. In the U.S.,
Hmm.
I think they hold about 5% market share, and they were pretty honest why. The U.S. market wants plant-based burgers, and their product is like a chicken substitute in terms of the
Correct.
texture and the taste. So, um, what changes they will make to really try to adapt to that market will be interesting. But according, I mean, looking at the prospectus, they didn't really talk about going into to burgers. So we're gonna see how that plays out in the next few quarters.
Okay, so quite a big valuation here for what you're saying. At least the numbers for the time being, market cap is now at 243 billion pesos. Just to give an idea. Now, Chris, how does this affect the other players? Which ones are you looking at when you're comparing valuations? The only thing that comes top of mind is URC, but will this affect other index players as well? Especially as it might also be a candidate for an index for the index.
Yeah, so definitely what you can compare it to directly is URC. Now, this is another major food manufacturer. Um, we all saw how food manufacturers have outlasted this pandemic. I mean, it was one of the bright sectors last year. Now, we didn't see a lot of growth, but at least they were able to maintain those revenues. Now, in terms of valuations, um, they're saying that it's more expensive than URC because of when it comes to earnings. So I don't think we're going to see a massive fluctuation in terms of moving out of one stock and moving into this one because companies like this, investors that get into companies like this usually already have it allocated. I mean, it is a pretty big deal that we have another major food manufacturer. It's a great addition to the stock exchange, and like you said, we may see it end up on the main board. So yes, I think investors are already loaded up on this. Most will not appreciate if it goes down in valuation. So we'll just have to see. So far, it's looking good to me. This is a good long term position or investment that you might want to get in. Mainly for companies like this, investors rely on dividends. So we'll just have to see.
And last question, Chris, before we let you go, timing of this IPO in the middle of a pandemic, will this lead others to follow? And also, just a quick note on those net foreign buying that we've seen. Will those investors be staying in the market, or will we be seeing an exodus as they start to maybe offload?
Yeah, so we have been seeing net inflows in the last, I'd say maybe a couple of weeks, but it isn't massive. It isn't massive foreign inflow. So I think this is them reacting to the rally that we saw last week. I mean, the index saw its best week going all the way back to October, and that probably drew some excitement from foreign investors. But it's gonna be we're gonna need to see a lot more for it to be significant. Now, what was the other question, Danny?
Will
Sorry.
this lead to other IPOs coming in?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So um, with regards to other IPOs, right now especially, we need to really look at. I mean, companies will only do an IPO if they have really ambitious growth targets, which is highly unlikely, especially because of this business environment that we're having. I mean, very few companies are willing to take the risk. And even if they wanted to, um, the alternative is to take out a loan from a bank, which are lending out at very low rates, lowest in recent history. But because of the bank's tighter, tighter,
Risk
uh,
aversion.
exactly, that nobody's wanting to loan out. But they're gonna need. It's not gonna be easy for a company to just come up and say we want to do an IPO.
Okay.
Monde really, in my opinion, pushed back the IPO as far as they could. They've been talking about this IPO for 3 or 4 years. They
Right.
pushed it back because they wanted to grow that alternative meat business. They were expecting it. They were waiting to see a really big push into that sector globally, but it just hasn't happened. Now, because of this pandemic, I think because these products are more expensive, I think it's going to be tougher for them to realize that great value that they see in it, and that's why they finally said, let's just give it to the public. If they see growth, then we're going to lose out a little bit, but that's okay.
Okay, so taking their chances there and looking longer term here and beyond this volatile period. Thank you so much for those insights. That was, of course, Chris Mangun of AAA Equities.
Thanks, Danny. Have a good day.
Here are the other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. The NGCP expects the Luzon grid to experience 4 more red alerts until next week. This comes after the unplanned outage at a power plant in Mariveles, Bataan. Red alerts will once again be raised in the grid today until Friday and on Monday because of the thinning power supply. Meanwhile, the grid may also be put on yellow alert on June 5, 6, and 8. Although the Energy Department already clarified that yellow alerts do not automatically mean power interruptions will take place. Now, in a separate announcement, Meralco said it may implement rotational power outages in parts of Cavite, Batangas, Laguna, Metro Manila, and Rizal until 3 p.m. The government expects to generate around 60 billion pesos from the proposal to tax POGOs in its first year of implementation. Now, under the Senate Bill 2232, the state will collect 5% gaming tax on POGOs and another 25% as final withholding tax on its employees. That is equivalent to collections worth almost 29 billion pesos this year and another 32 billion pesos for 2022. However, the amount does not yet include other taxes imposed on the POGOs. Recall that President Duterte certified this bill as urgent last Monday. This means that the measure is targeted to be passed before the Congress adjourns this week. And that's a first look into the business day. Today is Wednesday, June 2, 2021. Catch Business World Live for the market close. It's at 3:15 p.m. I'm Danie Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.